Fenwick wrote it down the next morning while the raid was still fresh. He debriefed 43 raiding parties in 6 months on that sector of the Ypres Salient. Not one had come back without leaving someone in the ground. So when Sergeant Cole's 8 men came through the British wire at 0200 on October 12, 1917, all present, nobody dragging anyone else, Fenwick sat down and started checking the numbers. That was his instinct when something didn't fit. He went back to the paperwork. The question he kept writing in his signals diary, across 3 separate entries from that night and the following week, was always the same. What had they given in exchange? He'd never been able to drop it. The ground between the lines at Passchendaele was nothing like the training maps back home suggested. The mud was the first thing. Not wet mud, not soft mud. Something that moved like water and held you like cement. That had bodies in it, British and German both, that you could sometimes hear settling when it was very quiet. The wire was in 3 or 4 layers in most places. Some of it old and rusted, some of it new and cruel, all of it invisible at night until you were in it. Men fell into shell craters and didn't come out. This happened regularly enough that it had stopped being reported as unusual. In August 1917, the Royal Engineers had surveyed the sector in preparation for the offensive. The distance from the British wire to the German wire at the crossing point Dre's party used, designated on the working maps as Crossing Charlie, was 83 yards. The survey teams had measured it twice. That figure was reliable. Everyone knew it, because in that ground, 83 yards was the difference between a workable raid and a death march, and nobody confused those two things. When Fenwick pulled Corporal Dre's compass log the morning after the raid, he found 340 yards recorded on the outward leg, 320 on the return, 660 yards total through an 83-yard gap. The party had not reached the German wire. They had turned back, on Cole's order, after 22 minutes without reaching it. Fenwick checked the compass twice. He checked the log against his watch records. He sat with it for a while, then went and found Cole. Cole listened to Fenwick read the numbers back and said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "Yes, that's what happened." He said it the way you confirm a report you've already reconciled with, not the way you hear something surprising. Fenwick asked him to clarify, and Cole declined. Fenwick debriefed the party individually, each man separated before giving his account. They took the statements separately. Fenwick didn't want one man's account getting into another man's head. What he got was something he'd never seen in 43 previous debriefs. Stories that aligned anyway, on the points that mattered, even though no one should have known what the others had said. Corporal Arthur Dre, 16 prior raids. They walked in a straight line the entire time. He was certain of it. He checked the compass every 30 paces, the way he'd been trained, and the needle never deviated more than 2 degrees. The mud was bad but passable. No wire caught them. No flares went up from the German side. Around the 17-minute mark, the party stopped. Not because Cole ordered it. They just stopped, Dre said, which had never happened to him before on a raid. 8 men reading the same thing from the dark at the same moment. He called it a sound initially, then corrected himself. More like a pressure, he said, the kind you feel before you hear it, like when the big guns start up far away and the air changes before the noise reaches you. Cole said back. They went back. That was his whole account. Private Thomas Mays, 19 years old, his first raid, he stayed close to Dre. At one point, the man in front of him stopped suddenly and he walked into him. Everyone had stopped. He couldn't see anything. He could feel something, he said, though he struggled to say what kind of feeling, and there was a smell. Not the usual Passchendaele smell of mud and old gas and rot. Something underneath all that. He tried twice in his written statement to describe it, and both times stopped. The second attempt he crossed out completely. What remained was, like a room that's been locked since before I was born. Sergeant Frederick Cole. I made the decision I considered appropriate. 1 sentence. Fenwick read it several times. He knew Cole's previous reports. The man wrote in full paragraphs, referenced compass bearings, counted wire cuts, and sentry positions. He didn't do 1 sentence. Whatever Cole had decided he wasn't going to explain, he'd decided firmly. All 8 mentioned the smell independently. None described it the same way. Fenwick noted this in his signals diary and found it more unsettling than the distances, though he couldn't have explained why at the time. Dre had nothing written. Where the question appeared on his form, there was a line through it, careful and deliberate, the kind of crossing out that takes a moment. Mays had his locked room. One other private, who asked not to be named, wrote, "I know this smell. I smelled it once. I don't want to say where." Cole said nothing about a smell. Cole said very little about anything. 12 days later, Cole was evacuated to the base hospital at Boulogne. Acute physical exhaustion and cognitive disruption, according to the medical record. He'd been decorated twice and had served 3 years without evacuation. He did not return to duty. He wrote one letter from Boulogne to his sister, and in it said only, "I found out something I wasn't supposed to find out. I'm not going to write it down." In 1919, Fenwick was given a translated copy of the German 117th Infantry Division's regimental history covering the Passchendaele period. He was looking for information about wire positions, something unrelated, something for a deposition he was writing for a different purpose entirely. He read through the patrol activities section quickly. He almost didn't catch it. 2 paragraphs, ordinary looking, dropped into a routine section on October patrol reports. The passage described several patrols sent into the ground between the lines from the German side. The patrols returned with inconsistent timing and inconsistent distances recorded in their logs. One patrol of 6 men, sent to investigate British wire-cutting activity, returned having recorded a distance 4 times the known width of the sector. They reported encountering nothing. Lieutenant Hoffner, who commanded the patrol, submitted a supplementary report noting that no man in his unit would discuss what occurred in the ground between the lines. He flagged it for further investigation. There is no record of further investigation in the regimental history. Fenwick underlined the passage 3 times. He wrote nothing beside it. No question mark, no note, nothing. Fenwick was thorough with his paperwork. The absence was its own kind of comment. The War Graves Commission surveyed the old Passchendaele sector between 1921 and 1923. Their records exist in the Imperial War Museum. The ground measured correctly from the British side and from the German side, up to a point. In a strip of ground roughly 200 meters wide in the center of the old no man's land, the survey team's measurements disagreed with each other and disagreed with the 1917 Royal Engineers survey. Not by much. A few meters, sometimes less. But the discrepancy was always in the same direction. Each new measurement came back slightly larger than the last, as though the ground in that particular strip was, each time you measured it, a little wider than it had been. The survey team put it down to instrument drift and ground subsidence from the shelling. They recorded it and moved on. This was, under the circumstances, the sensible thing to do. Dre emigrated to Canada in 1921. His family said he'd been in the war, and that was all they said. Cole died in 1931 in the hospital at Boulogne, where he'd been since 1917. He was lucid at the end, apparently. Fenwick visited once in 1929 and said afterward that Cole seemed calm. The one thing Cole said about the war in that visit was, "I went somewhere the war hadn't reached yet. That's all I'll tell you." I mean that exactly. Fenwick survived the war and went into insurance. He kept the signals diary and the compass log and a copy of the German regimental history with his underlining in it. He gave them to the Imperial War Museum in 1952 with a covering note that said only, "These relate to an incident in October 1917 for which I have no satisfactory explanation." He was 71 when he wrote that note. He'd had 35 years to find one. Mays came home and applied for work as a land surveyor. His application was straightforward except for one line. Under special skills, he wrote, "I understand that distance is not fixed." He wrote it plainly, no explanation. He was not hired. He worked in a hardware shop in Guildford, and his daughter said he'd sometimes stop mid-conversation and measure something nearby with his hands, a table, a shelf, then measure it again. She asked him once what he was checking. He said he was making sure it was the same size it had been. She thought he was eccentric. She may have been right. The land between the old British and German lines at that sector of Passchendaele is farmed now. Has been for a century. The families who work it know which ground is still churned and which runs clean. There is a strip, maybe 200 meters wide, that they have always plowed differently from the rest, shallower. No one made a rule about it. It's just how things have always been done on that strip, the way some knowledge gets passed on without being spoken. Fenwick's diary is in the Imperial War Museum. His entry for October 12, 1917, the morning after the raid, ends with one line that he appears to have added later, in different ink. It reads, "I don't think the ground between the lines belongs to the war. I don't think it ever did." He didn't elaborate. By then, he'd had 30 years to decide what to leave out. Where history ends and our story begins, we will let you decide where the line falls.